All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us here today at the Medical Device Investor Panel of Digital RESI November. We have 5 investors on this panel today who's eager to share with you their thoughts and perspective in the medical device space. This panel will be moderated by Gary Gashoni from Baymed Venture Partners. Gary, I'll let you take it away from here.
Great, thank you. Well, welcome everybody to our medical device investors panel today. We have, I think, a terrific panel, and we'll be going through a number of, I think, very relevant issues and questions in this COVID era for entrepreneurs and founders of medtech companies. But we're going to start off by introducing everyone, and I'm going to go around in a organized fashion here, and then I'll end up with myself, and then we'll get into the questions. So let's start, please, with Rachel. Rachel, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
So I'm strategy and business development and licensing for Medtronic. I'm a director within the surgical innovation operating unit. So we just now restructured Medtronic into 20 different operating units. So surgical innovations is the one that I help to support in businesses within surgical innovations. We are the largest operating unit within Medtronic. And for those of you who've tracked the history a little bit, surgical innovations actually came over with the acquisition of Covidien by Medtronic. So I've been in Covidien Medtronic for about 9 years now, mainly doing business development and licensing. So anything from acquisitions, divestitures, licensing, distribution, that's really what I focus on. Great,
Rachel, thank you very much. Obviously, Medtronic looms large as the most expansive medical device company in the world. So terrific to have you as part of the panel.
Great to be here.
Michelle, why don't, is it Michelle or Michelle?
Let's go with Michelle. It will be more easier for you. Yeah.
Michelle, if you don't mind telling us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I'm part of OrbiMed, the Israeli team. We are based in Tel Aviv. OrbiMed is a global healthcare VC, over $40 billion asset under management. Here in Tel Aviv, we manage about $500 million. Prior joining OrbiMed, I was the founder and CEO of digital health company, and more specifically in the area of mental health. In OrbiMed, I'm responsible of all the deal flow, including medical device, kind of choosing the company, working with them together until they get invested, and then afterwards until they get sold or IPOs. And I'm very excited to be here. So thank you for inviting me.
Great, terrific to have you. Similarly, OrbiMed, a very well-known global VC. Flora, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Flora, the co-founder of Lead Capital, a venture capital firm. So we focus on cross-border investment in life science and the clean tech industry, and especially in the medical device section. So as a cross-border investor, we help companies to explore the Chinese market by providing the capital, modifying go-to-China strategies, building up the business operations in China, and also helping developing the distribution networks for those companies. And last year, in order to supporting more innovation companies and the founders, so we started an innovation investment project called AMI. We broadly work with the relative departments from governments in the industry leading companies, incubators and accelerators from Canada, States, and China. And we also work with, very closely work with the investment institutions, especially in China section. So we gather all those resources in AMI platform and provide the professional service to those innovation companies who are looking for either to get funding or to explore the global markets. Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you for that. And is your office based mainly in China, or do you have offices in the US?
The office of venture capital is in Toronto, but we also have a team in China to support the go to China section. Yeah.
Great, terrific. And George, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself. I don't know if you have the ability to also go on video so we can see you, that would be preferred. But if not, we still are delighted to hear from you.
Yeah, I tried, but that didn't work. Okay, so this is George Lee. I'm a managing partner of Proxima, and Proxima is a venture capital firm. So we are managing 2 RMB fund and 1 USD fund. So it's like the Flora. So we're looking for the disruptive technology which to address the unmet needs. So we have specialty in China, and besides the venture capital fund, we also have the ecosystem being built up in China. So we brought in the physicians, KOL, and also, entrepreneurs, and put them together, basically, to help them to identify the unmet needs, and also, we provide all sorts of support, to help, startup and entrepreneurs, to understand the China market and help them access the China market. And we also running 5 incubators and accelerator in cities of, Suzhou and Wuhan, Zhengzhou, Chengdu, and Chongqing. So basically, provide access to the first tier life science industry park in China.
Terrific, that's very helpful. Also, just to help our attendees, if each of you can go to the participant button at the bottom and actually change your name to include maybe similar to what I've done, a hyphen and then the name of the firm that you're affiliated with, that would be useful. I think in the case of Michel, there's a big Orbimed sign behind him, so it's obvious, but I think it'll help our audience if they know. I'm Gary Gershoni. I'm the moderator of the panel, and I'm delighted to be part of this distinguished panel. I'm an interventional cardiologist by training, and have also been a serial medtech entrepreneur. I founded 2 successful medical device companies, both in the interventional cardiology space. The first was Vascular Solutions, had a successful IPO in the days that IPOs were a little bit more common for medtech startups. It was subsequently acquired by Teleflex. And the second company was a company called Angiscore, which was ultimately acquired by Spectranetics and then Philips IGT. In the last few years, I've been an early stage investor, mainly at the seed and early A stage, but in the last few months, I have founded a new VC fund, Baymed Venture Partners. We're based in the Bay Area. Our focus is maturing early stage medtech and digital health companies. So euphemistically, Series A, Series B, focused in North America, so US, Canada, opportunistically, and also very importantly, Israel. And I am very excited to go through this panel with my co-panelists and review some of the most relevant questions for investors and importantly, entrepreneurs and founders during this session. So we're going to start off with a series of questions, and I will circulate through our group, and we'll give everybody a turn to answer several of them. So let's start first with George. We'll go in the reverse order. So George, from your perspective and with your fund and the incubators, accelerators, and your ecosystem, how has the funding landscape changed recently, especially as it pertains to COVID-19 this year?
Yeah, COVID-19, I think, create some opportunity in the in vitro diagnostic space. So, we earlier of this year, we have invested the sort of, portable digital PCR solution. This solution, try to bring in the high sensitivity, testing, performance compared with traditional PCR, and which is compared with traditional PCR is much quicker. And this technology, we supported the team, licensed the technology from Harvard University, and now the product is in the prototype stage. And also, we invested the CRISPR technology, which can provide also the real-time testing performance for the COVID-19. And so I think that's created a lot of opportunity for the on-spot testing. That's a very interesting space. And also, regarding, we also see some trends and coming trends in China, and So after the COVID-19, and there's huge demand for the sort of telemedicine, and we have invested in the online psychology company, which provides the psychologists, sort of services, to the audience. So that's also compared with traditional offline, this is something, and yeah.
And I'm going to direct that question also to Michelle. How have you found the funding landscape has changed during this COVID era, particularly in your ecosystem?
Yeah, so, they say that a world event doesn't create new trend, rather than pushing it forward. So we see a fast forward regarding the home care. So we're talking about diagnostic home care, management of patient in home care. And we see this landscape, changing quite dramatically. A lot of our companies that had a somewhat a reach to home care kind of changed their focus. And I think what is interesting is that now medical device companies need to focus on the user. It wasn't necessarily so when they addressed the physician. He could cope with anything. He was well trained. Now the end user is either the patient himself or a low trained caregiver who happens to take care of that patient. And we see dramatically increase in companies that are moving to home care. And I think basically this is fast forwarding the future. We're going to see more and more patient being treated at home, being diagnostic at home, being managed at home. So yeah, I would say this is the most interesting part of it.
Yeah, I really like the way you've articulated. That's a very good point. Both as what had previously been a user, as an interventional cardiologist in medtech, and now as an investor, I agree with you. In the medtech space, we have primarily focused on the physician users as our customer segment. But indeed, I think COVID has clearly accelerated our move towards remote patient monitoring, telemedicine, telehealth. And in this case, the customer segment has become much wider, and you're quite right. Now the patient has to become the focus, the ergonomics of it, the ability to use the technology. But I think you've really kind of zeroed in on a very big shift in terms of how we need to consider marketing, founders of companies, entrepreneurs. Rachel, I'm going to shift to you now. So from your perspective at Medtronic, what are the most important sources of deal flow that you have for early stage companies?
Sure. Attending conferences like these certainly is one source of opportunity for us to really meet with early stage companies, even companies that perhaps are not as early stage. So we do attend these types of conferences. We do attend JP Morgan, specialized clinical conferences as well. But even a casual LinkedIn message, we certainly entertain those and understanding what's out there. We meet with other venture partners and see what they're seeing in the marketplace, whether it be trends or companies that are really starting to pick up. And we look at all sorts of different areas for deal flow, but I would say those are probably the top areas that we really focus on.
And just to sort of maybe expound on that a little bit, how has your experience been given the importance of these types of conferences? And I would agree with that. How has the shift to virtual conferences impacted your ability to screen companies, do the due diligence that might be important for you? Perhaps you can speak a little bit about that, and also with tips to investors and founders, how they need to adjust the way in which they interact with potential investors, whether it be a corporate strategic like yourself, or whether it be a venture firm.
Sure. So for us, it hasn't changed a whole ton. I'm sure with JP Morgan being one of our biggest conferences, that's going to be a little bit different because we do depend quite a bit on meeting face-to-face with companies and receiving updates from them. So I can't speak specifically to that one. But a lot of the conferences that we've attended, virtual has been just fine. I think for earlier stage companies, being prepared with digital materials and digital presentations on not only where you're at in development, but even quality questions, manufacturing questions, that would all be really, really helpful, making sure that that information is readily available for corporate companies or investors looking to invest.
And in terms of, again, I think this is a very important line of discussion, but in terms of startups that are looking for investment, and again, your perspective is more that as a corporate strategic, can you envision in this era, you know, we do hope that we're going to be coming to a bit of a close to the COVID era, perhaps in the next 6 months or what have you, with the wide availability of effective vaccines. But could you see yourself actually as a company making an investment, or perhaps even more than that, without actually having an in-person face-to-face meeting with the senior management team of a startup that you're evaluating?
You know, I think it's helpful to have even a little bit of face-to-face, even if it's over video, but some of our diligence does depend on actually being on site. And again, it depends on the stage of the company, but at least seeing the operations, if there are operations, if it's possible to even test the device or seeing a demo. We are doing a little bit of Zoom labs as well. But if there is an opportunity to go face-to-face, I don't necessarily think that'll go away after COVID, but perhaps more management presentations could be done through Zoom or another video platform.
Great. Okay, so Flora, I'm going to shift to you and we're going to change a little bit of our line of discussion right now. Can you talk a little bit about what specific area and development stage for medical device companies you're currently focusing on, and your investment strategy?
Okay, so we focus on in life science section, we focus on two areas. One is the orphan drugs, because we heavily work with the Sinopharm from China, and we actually we help them to sourcing the orphan drugs projects. And another section is the medical device, especially in the robotic surgery devices, which we also will do the direct investment. And because that is a huge demand in China, and we closely work with those Chinese leading hospitals and also the private hospitals. So we can see there is a very big trend to get the newest technology from the overseas market. So that is the two areas we focused on. And for the stage for the orphan drugs, it really depends on how we partner looking for. But for the medical device, we actually don't need the medical device company very late stage, almost to go IPO, not necessarily, but we do need those companies has the market validation data, which can prove they have the, they can, at least they can survive in the Chinese market. So that is how we look at those projects.
And then in terms of geographies, are you investing primarily in China? Are you investing in companies outside of China? Perhaps you can talk a little bit about that and why.
Yes, so in the geography, we, especially for the medical device, we actually directly invest in the headquarters from States or from Canada, and then we help them to go to China. So either to be their exclusive partner or to do the JV with them in China. And when they go to China, we will help them to get funding. And whether we will invest in that part is really depends on how they can develop in China and what kind of stage they want to build up. So yeah, so it really depends.
Mm-hmm. And are you able to also help them with additional barriers such as regulatory issues in China? Yes. Chinese, you know, whether it's drug, biotech in this case, or devices. Do you provide that, or do you, in fact, introduce these companies to other regulatory consultants and other types of assistance?
Yeah, for the orphan drugs, we heavily rely on our partner, but for the medical device, we help them to get the regular certificate from the relevant department, and we also help them to get the the manufacturing permit in China directly. And actually we can, because we work with the Chinese healthcare departments and from the central government, so we can shorten the time. I remember last year the fastest period is just take like 4 months to get to get proof of all the things. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And George, maybe you can talk a little bit about the specific geographies where you're investing and why.
Okay, yeah. So we majorly invest in China, but we also, do the, early stage investment, outside China. So this year we invest one company in Israel and Javelin. So we co-invest with Albert. And also we invest as a high throughput antibody, screening company in US, Halphabel. So the reason, because, we are really looking for the technology, which really, we can leverage our access and the resources in China, basically, to help those companies, to tap into the China market. And also, like Flora did, we also help company, to understand the regulatory path, and we set up sort of parallel strategy for early stage companies. Basically, they can leverage, the clinical resources, in both countries, and especially in China, like the gene therapies and cell therapies, can really speed up the clinical trial stage. And some medical device, especially diagnostic, also, China can provide this kind of, fuel source, to accelerate the company. So that's the reason, we build up the ecosystem. So we're working closely with the physicians and the doctors, and, we partner with the leading hospitals in cardiovascular and also ophthalmology. So also, working closely with the CRO firms and our team, we also have the CDMO facility and build up in Suzhou and Wuhan areas. So those kind of, facilities can really help companies, to overcome the hurdles, come to China. So yeah, so that's what we do.
Well, George, that's very helpful. And actually, I'm going to ask a question to both you and Flora, since you have so much expertise in this area. I know in my own experience, with the two companies I founded, at that time, certainly with the first company, China had not emerged yet as such a critically important market in medtech. And I think for sure it is now, and growing so rapidly. But it was also the case that for a smaller company or a startup, the barriers to entry or the challenges to entry were more than just regulatory. There were just, so much of it was related to the go-to-market strategy and how really to penetrate the market. And it was the case in those days that you really needed to form a joint venture with a Chinese entity before one could really consider moving in. Now, that was different, or is different, for some of the large multinational corporations like a Medtronic. But certainly at the stage of a startup, that was required. How has that changed? And how would you, if you were letting our audience know that include startup founders and entrepreneurs, how should they approach China and the life cycle of their company? Is it something that should be thought of early on, as opposed to what we used to consider in prior years, where it was US was the most important market, Europe, perhaps some other markets around the world, and just to approach China a little bit later on because of the complexities? But what would you advise a startup CEO now in terms of their approach to China? Either one of you, if you could answer that.
Okay, so I think firstly, it really depends on what kind of company it is. For example, if the company is the medtech, but very focused on the AI platform, what I suggest is just stay in North America for a little while and grow up. And when you get enough funding, and when you get a very strong team, especially you can support the 24/7 service in China, then then you can consider whether you should go to China. And also, you need to have a very, very strong IP. But if you are kind of like the medical device, kind of like the robotic surgery company, what I suggest is don't wait and come to the professional companies, especially like the professional investment institutions, or some likely very big, some of the big device companies from China, and talk to them, discuss the go to China strategy. And especially if you want to go to China, just don't stay the comfortable zone, just trying to play big and think big. Because if you want to go to China, you need to work very closely with those governments and also like the industrial park, and you need to get the funding from the industrial fund, right? So they don't like the very kind of like the tiny things. They want to something big, but we can do it by stages. The first stage, we can just for example, set up the operations in China, to set up the JV in China. But in the second stage, we maybe can do something bigger to work with the leading player in China. And in the third stage, we can be kind of like some even bigger, like to go to IPO or to do some M&A deals in China to make the company I mean, the business volume to be bigger, so that they can get more funding and get more support from those governments or from those leading players. So that is my suggestion, and that also is how we practice in Chinese market.
Great, no, that was very, very helpful. Michelle, I'm going to come back to you now. Can you discuss with us a little bit how you approach companies early on? What are the key criteria that you use to identify companies that you would consider worthy of doing a deep dive, further due diligence, and then potential investment? What are your key criteria?
Yeah, sure. So we have here in the Tel Aviv office something that we like to call the investment triangle. I would share it with you. I mean, every angle in the triangle is kind of mandatory criteria, but not sufficient. So you have to have all three in order to kind of us to dive in. So the first one is experience and enthusiastic team. We really want to see the team that it's has its skin in the game. So they're putting all their effort, the time, the money even into the company. Secondly, it's an interesting field with breaking through technology. Please note that I mentioned field and not specifically the idea, because I do believe that through the life cycle of the company, they might do a little pivot, a little change, but this is okay as long as it's a strong team and it's an interesting field. And thirdly, and I think this is the one that most early companies don't consider, is a strong syndicate. So before you take money from any investor, you would like to make sure that this investor is will push you forward and will be compliant with bigger investors such as OrbiMed. After we see those three criteria, we kind of do a more deep dive into the company. We are very data-driven fund, so everything has to be with perfectly aligned scientific rationale. And then we have kind of a very structured due diligence process, which is might take between 3 to 6 months. Doing so, we'll interview the company, the advisory board, KOLs, external expert, use our internal resources, and so on. So yeah, this is kind of how we judge company from the beginning to end.
Thank you. And I'll focus a little bit on what you said, that the process can take 3 to 6 months. I think that's very important for startup founders to understand that although your process may be a little bit longer perhaps than other funds, that planning for a financing round really does need to start early because the due diligence decision-making process really does vary from investor to investor. So for sure, including this in the planning for a financing is very important. Rachel, I'm going to have you answer that question as well. When you're looking at companies that you might consider investing from Medtronic in your particular sector, What are the specific criteria that you look at in trying to identify those companies that would then lead you to go and do a deeper dive and a full due diligence for consideration of investment? What are the key criteria for you?
Starting out with fit, so making sure that the company has thought about the fit within Medtronic. Unfortunately, I've seen a bunch of companies reach out, which is fine, but they often don't have an answer as to how they see the fit with Medtronic. So helping us understand the fit as well would be really helpful. Also looking at, stage of the device, we do that. Some testing. Any testing that you have, even better would be animal testing. If you have patient data, even better. A lot of companies, the stage don't go. So initial testing is always helpful. Market opportunity, something for Medtronic. We probably have an idea on the market opportunity, but hearing your perspective on what you think the market size is and where you would actually play in the market, I think would definitely be helpful as well. And so those are probably a good start of the things that we look at. Again, stage of the company is really important for us as well, and understanding that. But those are some of the things I would say are probably top of the list.
Thank you. And I'll add to that a little bit. I think for our audience and entrepreneurs, most of the exits in medtech are going to be through acquisition, through M&A. And I think it's very important for the management team early on to try to understand how the company, the technology will fit into the pipeline of a potential corporate strategics. I think all too often, founders are very excited about the technology that they may have developed or the clinical need that they're addressing. But at the end of the day, in most cases, companies are going to be acquired if they're successful. That is the true exit. IPOs less so. And really understanding that strategic fit early on, I think, is critically important. I'll also add that I agree with everything that was said here. And of course, the criteria for a corporate strategic like Medtronic, some of those criteria are going to have nuances that may be different than those of an institutional investor. But I do still think that in most cases, understanding that the company is there to solve a very important unmet clinical need. I think it needs to be driven initially by needs testing. This is based on, I think, my own personal experience, and certainly has become adopted academically by places like the Stanford Biodesign Program, and really solving a need that isn't just a pain point for physicians, but it is a need that is addressing a common problem or a large market. Doesn't necessarily have to be common if it's an orphan drug. We're talking about devices now, but it has to be a significant market. To be able to attract the kind of sophisticated investors like an OrbiMed and other investors, the market really has to be meaningful. And usually now we're talking about markets that are at least $500 million to $1 billion or larger, and that will move the needle for a corporate strategic like a Medtronic or other such companies. Secondly, the technology really does need to be driven by that unmet need. I think many investors have become concerned in prior years by technologies that are very disruptive, that require very complex regulatory pathways, but in fact, it's counterintuitive. It is those technologies that often are associated with larger markets, ultimately are more successful in terms of the return on investment for investors. The exits are earlier, again, counterintuitively, because often the acquisitions occur before full commercialization. This is actually data that has been presented and available from a number of analysts. So I think shying away from disruptive technologies because of concerns over the regulatory path is probably short-sighted. And then I would agree the data very strongly supports the experience of the team. So we look for important predictive data. And in fact, if you look at some of the analyses that have been done by a number of groups, including the Kaufman Foundation, having an experienced team that have had a hopefully prior successful exit is perhaps the most powerful predictor that this particular company that we're looking at will have success. It doesn't mean that we won't ever invest in a new entrepreneur, otherwise no one would become experienced, but there needs to be evidence of experience on the team, success on the team, because that is an important predictor for sure. I'm going to move on now to other questions. Kind of going a little bit back to that, and I think I'm going to come back to you, Michelle, on this question. You talked about the enthusiasm of the team, and I alluded to the experience. Can you talk about how important it is to you at OrbiMed that the team has had expertise or experience in the past in medtech specifically, have had exits before? Is this a make or break for you? And if the team, and if it isn't, and if the team hasn't had that, how do you compensate for it?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, part of the investment triangle is experience and enthusiastic team. This is ideal, of course. But Gary, as you mentioned, we don't always have experienced team, right? Otherwise, nobody could progress the company. What we like to see is typically either the company leadership is taking advisory that is expert in the field of the company, or they are willing to embrace one. And this is coming up to your question, what do we do if there's an inexperienced team? So we bring external consultant that is part of OrbiMed, and we put it as go, no go for the investment. And we make sure that this consultant is being heard and his opinion matter. Because it's, especially now, the medical device landscape is extremely hard to navigate. And you really want to have someone out there that is, giving you external consult that has been to all the milestones and understand the life cycle of medical device company. Saying all that, we are extremely open for new entrepreneurs, for new early stage companies. They have, they use the what we call the Israeli chutzpah, challenging the status quo. We love seeing that, and there are a few successful companies here in Israel that start from someone who didn't have any experience at all in medical device.
Great, very helpful. Rachel, I'm going to turn to you now. So when you're considering a company for potential investment, what level of supporting data or proof of concept do you generally require prior to investing? Is it preclinical data? Is it first in human, early feasibility data? Is it more advanced clinical experience? Perhaps you can talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So we're a little unique. We also have a venture arm within Medtronic, and the business is actually partnered with our venture arm to invest. And when we do look at companies that are a little bit earlier stage, some data is important. Bench data is helpful at the very least, but I would say animal data is preferred. It doesn't have to be first in man studies yet. We have invested in companies without human data. But ideally, at the very least, bench data, but I would say preferably animal data.
Given that you found a company, again, this is for you, Rachel, and we've heard a little bit from Michelle about the due diligence time that's required at OrbiMed for a typical investment. Once you've decided you have an interest, can you talk a little bit about your due diligence process and the timeline from the initial meeting with the company?
It really varies. It can go from a few months to, I've been in diligences for much longer than that, closer to a year. So it really depends on what data is available, I would say, actually from the company, whether it be thoughts around their future manufacturing plans. It usually falls a little bit more on the company and the available data and ability to answer our questions. Rather than our process. If it fits within our strategic priorities, then we can usually move pretty quickly to make sure that we can adapt to any sort of fundraising process timeline that the company may have.
Great, thank you. Flora, I'm going to ask you the same question. We've heard from a large global VC firm that their due diligence process can take a while, 3 to 6 months. We know that corporate strategics often, for a variety of reasons, can take quite a while as well. I think investors, I think that companies and entrepreneurs are always concerned about timelines and making sure, of course, that particularly in the COVID era, that they're not running out of capital. What's your process and how long does it take?
Yeah, it's really take a long time actually. So we normally will do the due diligence with our Chinese partner, especially on the orphan drugs. It's really dependent on how our partner evaluate. Do they think this project will fit for them? Do they think this drug can has a very huge market in the future in China? And and also for the medical device, it also take several months at least. Sometimes it even will take 1 year because we will double check with our especially those hospitals to see whether those medical device can be used in China in the next few years, and also whether those how many hospitals will estimatedly to use them, and what is the market size for them. So that is from the market consideration. And another thing is we do the due diligence on the team. No matter like how many not only like how many experts or scientists in your team, but we also will take some time to see whether the founder are very loyalty to their projects, whether they have the guts in their minds, and what kind of and also like what kind of lifestyle they have, because this is really important for them. We need to make sure when they go to China, they still can focus highly focus on their projects. Yeah, so it will take a little bit long time to do the DD. Yeah.
And George, what about your group? Typically, once you've found a company you have an interest in, how long does it take from the initial meeting until you make a decision about investing, and the timeline for the due diligence?
Yeah, so for cross-border investment, so it's usually take a little bit longer. So the time range is varies from 2 months to 3 months. And for project, we need to do the site visit, and we need to meet the executives and the management team. And for the domestic investment, it's relative quicker. So we do usually 1 to 2 months. So we finish the DD process.
Well, that's a very attractive. You sound like you're quite a bit quicker than some of our other panelists. So for those of you in the audience, you should for sure take George's contact information down because of that. So shifting to a different line of questioning now. Michelle, in your case, when your group at OrbiMed decides to make an investment and moves forward, what type of involvement do you have with your portfolio companies? Do you always expect to have board representation? Are you actively involved in mentoring the companies? Being on the board can mean involvement once every 2 or 3 months. Mentoring could be much more than that. Obviously, investors shouldn't have to micromanage a company, but give us an idea of the kind of involvement that you have at OrbiMed with your portfolio companies after you've made the investment.
Yeah, sure. So we typically tend to be on the very involved side, I would say. We definitely would like to have at least 1 seat board, sometimes 2, depends how early we get in and how much capital we bring to the round. I would say that we are doing some mentoring to the company. Again, depend on the company life cycle and depends on the company management team. So if the company is in the raising future round, for example, they definitely could use franchise like OrbiMed to help them introduce them to new investors, to strategics, relevant, and so on. In other cases, when the company is in 8 to 9 months R&D and there is not much strategic involved in terms of management, so we let the company go ahead in its own pace and just update it once a month or in board meetings. But we tend to be highly involved, and many of our portfolio companies use this for their advantage. So yeah, this is where we are.
Great, very helpful. I'm just going to put a pitch out to the audience. We're going to be doing a Q&A session here in a few minutes. If you have any questions for our panelists, please do enter them into the chat box, and either Joey or I will then address them to the panelists so that it can be done in an organized fashion. So if you have any questions, please make sure that you enter them into the chat box. Rachel, in your case, what type of involvement do you have, does your division at Medtronic have if you make an investment? Maybe you can explain that to us, because often it can be very different than the type of involvement of an institutional investor like OrbiMed.
Sure. So we do partner with our venture arm. The actual operating units can invest on their own as well, or our venture arm can invest on their own. But we typically partner with our venture arm, so even potentially split the investment between the two. And we usually stay very close to the company, whether that be helping through a little bit of mentoring or best practices as we're able to. But we also, we do look sometimes for board observation seats. I would say rarely do we go for actual board seats, but it is possible. But as long as we're able to really understand, how the company is progressing and have that dialogue with the company, that's really what we look for.
Great. We're going to finish off with a final question here. This is for you, Flora, to start with. What's your outlook for early stage medical device investing as we get to the post-COVID era and over the next couple of years?
Yeah, okay. I think it will be a huge trend for those medical devices, especially like the robotic surgery or other similar types. And for the cross-border investment, what I can tell all the audience is recently we got many requests from our Chinese partners, no matter from our LP or from our partners. They are they are very eager to looking for the investment opportunities, especially in the medical device. So I believe in the next 2 to 3 years, that is a very great trend we should look at.
Thank you. George, why don't you also answer that question? What's your outlook for early stage medical device investing in the immediate post-COVID era and for the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think in China, so the early stage, investment in the medical device is become more and more active, and there's more funding, flow into the medical device because the Hong Kong 18A special listing requirement, and also the mainland China stock listing requirement. So basically, allows the pre-revenue medical device company to be listed. So that's dramatically changed the landscape. So now you can see many later stage VC firm, they move forward to the early stage investment. So we see that that's kind of coming trend. And in terms of the cross-border, we also see a lot of many more attractive deals now. So I think it's good investment opportunity, from our perspective.
Thank you. And Michelle, please answer that as well. You have a different perspective in Tel Aviv. OrbiMed also is a global company. What's your outlook for early stage medical device investing as we get to the post-COVID era and over the next couple of years?
So I mentioned the trend of moving to home care, and this is not necessarily at home, but it's kind of moving away from treating patient and managing patient from hospital. So every medical device that will be connected and be able to be documented properly and manageable from a distant facility I think we'll see a surge after the COVID area. This is not a trend that it's going to be disappeared, rather than become more the new normal, I would say.
Great. And if you're going to look at your crystal ball, Rachel, what's your outlook for early stage medical device investing in the immediate post-COVID and next couple of years?
Sure, we've still seen quite a bit of early stage companies reaching out to us seeking investment. So I haven't really seen a difference actually in COVID, apart from potentially some companies seeking more funding right now. So maybe even an uptick in requests for funding. So I would say even post-COVID, maybe there is that opportunity to have more of those face-to-face discussions, but I actually haven't seen much of a decline in activity in terms of early stage investing.
Great, thank you. Joey, I think we've come to the end of the formal questioning and panel discussion. I know that we wanted to leave a few minutes for our attendees for Q&A. I did look at the chat box and I haven't seen any specific questions. So I don't know if you have any other ones that you're aware of.
No, I don't see any question either. So it seems like our audience doesn't really have any question at the moment, but that's okay. We could leave it at that. And I believe that all of the panelists are in the partnering system of RESI November. So if any of the attendees have any question later on, or, oh, I see a message in the Q&A chat box.
Yeah, so I see a question here from S.A. Park. How about devices for CNS? I'm assuming you mean neuro-type devices specifically. I'm not sure I understand exactly what the question refers to. Perhaps that's about the interest in CNS devices. Michelle, I'm going to throw that one at you. Because you seem like you're very, quick on your feet. So what do you think about CNS devices?
Yes, I mean, it is quite a general question, I would say, but generally CNS, it's a tough market. And so in the CNS, we would like to see more proof of concept and scientific rationale, even first in human, because there are, I mean, the area of CNS devices is full of companies that had a huge promise, a huge claim to fame, and then when they come to first in human, it just didn't work. So I would say since it's a difficult field, we would like to see more solid proof of concept.
Great. And I'll weigh in a little bit with some general comments here as we're closing up. And that's that as we entered the COVID era, there was a lot of prediction about the impact that this would have on early stage companies. Everything from the impact on innovation, the ability to get funding, and valuations of companies. And a lot of these predictions actually turned out to not be correct. And I think that we're still in the midst of COVID. We're hopeful that several of the vaccines, particularly the ones that have been reporting their phase 3 trials recently, appear to be very promising, that this will help accelerate our emergence from COVID. But COVID has had a lot of positive benefits too. Our ability to interact and see many companies rapidly, virtually, in a very efficient way has been dramatic and almost overwhelming. I can say for myself as an investor, having gone to many meetings in the past, in-person meetings, the proliferations of meetings almost on a weekly basis, if not monthly, and simultaneously has been quite an advance in terms of engagement and finding out about new technology. I would also say that my high-level perspective is innovation is far from dead during COVID. It's been dramatic. There have been a lot of pivots, of course, a lot of emphasis on alternative delivery systems, remote patient monitoring, telemedicine, and a lot of this is going to persist, not just because things have changed structurally, but we've learned that it's better. In the healthcare system that I'm affiliated with, in December of 2019, this is one of the largest health systems in the Bay Area. I'm based in the San Francisco Bay Area. Less than 5% of patient interactions with caregivers was through telemedicine. And in the last few months, it's been over 50%. Now, it is true that some of that will go back to prior levels, but I think that there will be a very persistent effect for a variety of reasons. It's simply more efficient. It's simply more patient and user-friendly. And for a patient to have to drive an hour to the doctor's office or half an hour, sit in the waiting room for 2 hours, then have another half an hour drive back, rather than be at home and have a telemedicine visit that occurs on demand when they just go on their computer, they can go about their business until that is available, and then have the ability of specific devices that can help with the examination. Tito Care in Israel is a well-known company that has developed some of these technologies, and there are many other companies that have done that. I think these kind of advances are here to stay, and I agree with some of you said earlier, Michelle. These are just accelerations of trends that occurred previously, not necessarily, you know, brand new types of trends, although some are, but for sure, the ones that have become most evident are truly have been catalyzed by the COVID-19 epidemic and or pandemic. So I'll close with those comments. I see that we may have some other questions. One more question here, we can probably finish with that, is investing interest on drug and device pairing where tech needs drug and device for functioning. I'm going to give that to you, Rachel. So again, to rephrase the question, how important are drug device combinations for you now as you look at companies to evaluate?
There's quite a few that we've seen come out. We are not a drug company. We're more of that device company, but we do partner with drug companies to have more of that drug device combo out in the marketplace. So there is an opportunity there for I think collaboration in the industry in general. But we still look at those, even though we're not a drug company by nature. We still review those, and we see them as sometimes the future of a particular area or procedure, especially.
Great. Well, we've come to the end of the hour, and I have to really thank our panel. I've learned a lot listening to your answers to these questions. It's been a pleasure participating. I want to thank the RESI organization for putting together these terrific meetings, and please continue to do so, particularly with COVID. And in particular, thank you, Joey Wong, for being your company's representative on this panel. Thank you so much.